Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining Snowflake Office Hours with FAIR, a subscription model that lets consumers and gig economy drivers get a car on their phone and return it whenever they want. Today, I'm joined by Brandon Adams, Director of Analytics at FAIR, who will talk about his experience using Snowflake. Brandon will get into more details, but after migrating to Snowflake, FAIR can now access all of their data, enabling all their users to confidently make data-driven decisions in real time. And my name is Jeannie Liu. I'm a product marketing manager at Snowflake. We'll hold all questions until the end of the session, but as always, please ask any and all questions throughout the duration of the webinar because no question is off limits. Brandon, without further ado, off to you.
Hey guys, my name is Brandon. I am the Director of Analytics over at FAIR, in charge of a centralized analytics team of both data warehousing engineers and a data analyst. We support the entire organization from product to marketing to finance and treasury and operations. And we support both the end-to-end ETL side and data warehousing and ingestion, all the way through the analysis, the dashboards, and ultimately the analytics that drive all of FAIR's decision-making as a company. Without further ado, I'll continue on. So as Zoe mentioned, FAIR, if you guys haven't heard of us yet, we're a subscription model in Santa Monica, and ultimately we are working on creating a better way to get a car all through your mobile device. Long story short, you're able to download the app, shop and browse cars, check out, sign your contract, and get the car delivered to you all within the same day, and with the flexibility to return the car whenever you want. So you can have a car for a week, a month, a year, as long as you want, return the car, and have no strings attached. With that being said, we have been around for about 2 years now, a little over 2 years now. We have had hyper growth just by the state of things. No one's really done what we have been accomplishing here as a company. I'm not sure if you guys can see my slide I'm currently on. There we go. Ultimately, we launched about 2 years ago. We have had over 70,000 customers through the app, millions of downloads, and ultimately are expanding throughout the US right now and doing a lot of really cool things on the data side and the analytics side and the data warehousing side that require a really modern tool set to be able to accomplish what we are looking to ultimately do. And I'll get into that a little bit more later. Going on to the next slide, there might be a little bit of delay, just give it a second. But ultimately, over the course of 2 years, our data journey here has been pretty expansive from where we started to where we are today. Ultimately, we started with a Presto data warehouse that was great when we had small to medium-sized data. Ultimately, we nowadays are piping in more than 40 million records a day, which requires a very elastic data warehouse that can handle, for example, JSONs really well, can handle cross-database joins really well, and ultimately has the flexibility that to give us data in seconds rather than minutes or hours. Ultimately, I'm not going to go through this entire data journey, but where we are right now is a combination of that middle section of Snowflake with Airflow, with Looker, and GitHub and Circle CI for version control and continuous deployment and automation. And then ultimately we have Looker powering a lot of the self-service analytics for the organization as well. Next slide. So while it loads, I'll just kind of give you guys an overview. So we're a very microservice environment here at FAIR, which means that we have probably close to 50, if not more, Postgres databases throughout our entire company, which requires, and unfortunately, it requires a lot of cross-database joins on the analytics side of things that obviously Postgres isn't set up to do by itself from a more analyst standpoint. we have other platforms like Salesforce and NetSuite and all these different disparate data sets that all work together on the back-end side of things, but aren't in the same monolithic database on the Postgres side. So obviously we have to find a solution that can handle close to, I would say, 500 tables and data sources, and give us the flexibility to really be able to query millions or billions of records extremely quickly, and provide our very tech savvy and growing organization with real-time analytics based on their requirements. So this is what 2 years ago looked like. It's actually a lot more crazy, but I wanted to simplify it for just this slide. Moving on to the next slide. We've really been able to leverage some of these more modern tools like Snowflake, for example, to be able to handle these really large data ingestions and transformations, and ultimately be able to give us the flexibility to give different teams the bandwidth and the power they need. So if data science needs a large instance, we're able to support them. If Looker needs a small instance, we're able to support that. And ultimately, we're able to spin up and down these warehouses in a matter of seconds rather than take weeks or longer potentially on DBA migrations and a lot of the more manual processes that have, in the past anyways, slowed down data warehouse development and ETL. Going on to the next slide, just highlighting again a little bit about our craziness in terms of who we support. So we work very closely with the production engineers across our inventory side and pricing, and our asset management and transportation layer, and ultimately finance, accounting, et cetera, and so forth, operations. Again, this is kind of a truncated version, but as you can see, we also have marketing tools like Braze and AppsFlyer for mobile attribution, and Branch for deep linking, and ultimately we power a lot of that through mParticle data as well as the customer data platform. We have a lot of S3 files that we get pushed up every day that we have to ingest into Snowflake. Salesforce is an example. Ultimately, we have all that going into an ETL tool of ours, and then ultimately we have hourly transformation jobs running that house and continually update our star schema that currently involves about 2 to 3 fact tables and close to 15 dimensions. That another requirement that we had was create everything in a real-time instance, and having a star schema constantly update every hour with transformed and highly curated data sets is as close as real-time that we possibly have gotten. And then ultimately the raw tables go into Snowflake. About 500 raw tables get updated every couple minutes using our ETL. So if users need access to the raw files for real-time analytics, they can hit Snowflake and parse, run, analyze real-time data as it comes in as well, which is really great for some of the operations teams that we have here at FAIR. Going on to the next slide. I'll only spend a second on this one, but ultimately, Looker is powering our visualization layer. We have, at any given day, probably a couple hundred users in Looker at all given times, running schedule jobs, alerts, analytics on their operations, as you can see. And Looker is sitting on top of Snowflake, and even just in the Looker warehouse alone, we have had over 500,000 queries run, and ultimately, in my opinion, no one's ever complained about Looker performance because of Snowflake, and any dashboard, any look, any Explorer runs within seconds. And when you have the kind of data that we have at this moment, with billions of records in some tables, it's definitely no easy feat, especially because a lot of these ones also have very nested JSONs that we need to always parse out and transform as well. On to Snowflake. This is about a month old, so I'm sure it's even crazier now, but as of when I pulled this up, we had about 50 terabytes, if not more, stored in our Snowflake instance with our ETL jobs and everything else running to pipe data in. We've had, whenever I look at our history, about 50 to 100 queries running concurrently every minute. if not more at this point. As I mentioned, real-time data pipelines. We have 5 quote-unquote databases in Snowflake, but within that we have at least 20 schemas, probably closer to 50 at this point, with all of our staging schemas and microservice databases that we're piping in, 500 plus different tables and data sources. And the best part that our team is really small here. On the data warehousing side, we have 2, maybe 3 people pretty much managing most of the data warehouse and ETL processes. And I would say less than 10% of the job is maintenance. If that, I would say maintenance is pretty much just provisioning people at this point. At that point, we're able to automatically scale up or down instances within a couple seconds. And there's really not much on the DBA side that we ever have to do, which is awesome given the fact that our bandwidth is doesn't really have any room